right. So that was fun.
That was
How
fun.
about we, yeah, let's get started here just with some brief introductions here in case some of you are unfamiliar with us. My name is Serena. I am the Environmental Education and Outreach Specialist with the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory, or SFBBO for short. If you've never heard of us, we are a nonprofit dedicated to conserving birds and their habitats through science and outreach. And we are holding this event in celebration of our 40th anniversary this year, and we're going to be focusing on a few of the birds that we've studied over the years. I do want to note that most of our work is done on unceded Muwkma Ohlone land, so we do want to acknowledge them as the original stewards of our local environment here in the Bay. And we also want to recognize that they continue to be an important part of the Bay Area community today. We also want to thank everybody who donated to help support this event. Your donation allows us to continue putting on these programs and make them available to the public, in addition to supporting our science work. So thank you so much to everyone who did that, as well as contributed to Jack, John Muir Laws, who also goes by Jack. He does these programs for free, and we are so grateful for that. And I also want to note that today we are joined by Sfbbo biologist Angie Chen. So I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Yeah, hi. As Serena said, my name is Angie Chen. I am a Snowy Plover biologist at SFBBO, but I've also worked with a lot of the species that we are going to be going over today. I joined the organization initially in June 2015, and I left for a bit, and then I came back in September 2017, and I've been here ever since. My primary role is working with snowy plovers, as you see on this beautiful slide right here. They're really cute little guys, and we'll get into some more fun facts about them later on.
Awesome. And now it is my pleasure to introduce John Muir Laws, who again I will refer to as Jack. Jack is a scientist, educator, and author whose mission is to connect people to art, science, nature, and conservation through field journaling. He's been trained as a wildlife biologist and is an associate of the California Academy of Sciences. He teaches skills in observation, curiosity, and creative thinking to help people forge a deeper and more personal connection with nature through keeping illustrated nature journals and understanding science. In addition to teaching these workshops and creating free video tutorials, Jack is also the founder of the Nature Journal Club on Facebook, which is an online community of over 44,000 nature journalers, and the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, which is an annual event that gathers people who are passionate about nature, art, science, curiosity, and wonder. Jack has also written and illustrated several books, including numerous guides on nature journaling, drawing birds, and much more. And among his many accolades, he has received the 2020 Bay Nature Local Hero Award for his work in environmental education. So we at SFBBO are so fortunate and grateful that Jack is doing this program with us. Jack, is there anything you want to share before we get started?
Well, I'm delighted and honored to be here with you. I believe that good conservation starts with good science, and you do so much to connect science and education and to help us get data to be able to make good decisions about birds. Otherwise, we're just winging it. And the work which you do is so important. And I'm also just really happy to be here with Angie. You're a person who really spends a ton of time in the field. So the insights of people who really spend their time with the critters is it's just so valuable to kind of get to hang out with you, because you're going to have insights about these beasties that you can't get anywhere else. So thank you for what you are doing on behalf of the birds.
Thank you. That was very eloquent.
All right, so I think with that, I'll pass it on to Angie, who will kick it off with our first species that we'll be focusing on today.
Yeah, so the first species that we're going to be focusing on today is my specialty, the Western Snowy Plover. So this little guy is a federally threatened species of shorebird. They're some of the smallest shorebirds that we get here in the Bay Area. They're about 4 to 6 inches tall, And a pretty good approximation is that it's about the size of a soda can. So if you've got one of those nearby, then that's about the size of this bird. They nest here in the summer, but they are found here year round. So you can see them in huge wintering flocks right about now if you go to the right place. And then once they start breeding, they become super cryptic. If you can tell, they've got this really nice pale gray back, and that blends in really well in our beaches and our salt pan habitats. They nest directly on the ground. The males and the females will work together to build and decorate a nest, and they also work together to incubate the nest. But once the chicks hatch, then the female goes off and the male raises them all on his own. They're a pretty good icon for Father's Day. We love talking about our Western snowy plovers. The dads will brood the chicks for about 4 weeks until they fledge, and then he'll still kind of stick around for a little longer as the chicks get their bearings on how to be a plover. Our plovers are currently in recovery. So like I mentioned, they are a federally threatened species, specifically the coastal population. Sfbbo works with plovers exclusively in the Bay Area. So anything that's really on our beaches is covered by a different organization. And our plovers almost all nest on salt pan habitats. So if you've ever been, up in Menlo Park by the Dumbarton Bridge and you've seen some of those big ponds full of water, some of those ponds dry out during the summer and the plovers will nest there. If any of you guys are familiar with Cargill, they used to own a lot of salt production ponds in the area, and the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge has since acquired those. And now that area is being preserved for plover habitat. Plovers are super cute. The eggs are just about the size of the first joint on my thumb, so they're super tiny. Really, their biggest threat in our area is habitat loss and also human disturbance. So we would love it if everyone here can adhere to leash laws and also respect plover signs on their beaches.
All right, so I think we'll get ready to learn to draw these, and so we'll hand it over to Jack now.
Oh, thank you so much. So that was really interesting. So I didn't know that the males are the ones who are involved with raising the little chicks and telling them stories at night. That rings a lot of bells with me. This is cool, and I've also got now that soda can analogy is going to really stick with me. What I'd like to do is we're going to be looking at 3 birds today. We're going to be looking at snowy plovers, least terns, and white-crowned sparrows. And what I'd like to do is to, as this workshop goes along, is for us to think about getting sketches where the snowy plover sketch is distinct from the least tern sketch, is distinct from the white-crowned sparrow sketch. So how can I get my plover to look like a plover? And I'm going to suggest for these 3 birds, there are 3 critical factors. And I'm not talking about the little field marks, sort of where they've got a dark spot or don't. I'm going to be thinking about just if you were to spray paint them purple, not that you'd want to, but were you to, were they old to be spray painted purple, you'd still want to be able to tell the difference between these 3 purple little birds. So what are the differences in their body shapes that we can get into our sketches? We're going to be looking at 3 factors today to help us make our plovers look like plovers. We're going to be looking at posture, proportion, and angles. Posture, proportion, and angles. So this little triad is going to, you can apply to any drawing of any bird. And we're going to be able to make our plovers look plovery. You can make your warblers look warblery using the same methods: posture, proportions, and angles. So as we go through these 3 species, we're going to see how those are different on these different birds. Let's, if you could, turn off this, there we go. I'm going to now share one of my screens. And we're going to start just with some pictures of the plover. And I'm going to suggest that everybody at home grab yourself a piece of paper and a pencil, and we're going to be sketching along together. And by the end of this, you're going to have just sort of a gestalt sense of ploveriness, of white-crowned sparrowiness, of terniness. And we hope to turn those pictures into something that look like the birds themselves. All right, we're going to start with our little plover friends. Let's go to this. So this will be fun. We've got 3 little birds, and we have, they are all little, sort of, they've all kind of got something going on with shades of black and white. So I thought that the kind of, pied means black and white. So that's what's kind of holding these together as a visual concept for me. And let's take a look at our little friend, the Snowy Plover. Right, here it is. First of all, could I get an aw? Because that's just ridiculously cute. Now, I once had a biology teacher who heard one of the students in the class refer to something as cute and became enraged that you would refer to this critter as cute. I think that person had never really seen a snowy plover, because this is ridiculously cute. So let's take a look at what makes it cute. Basically, we human beings are predisposed to think anything is cute if it has neonatal features. So what are neonatal features? Well, I'm glad you asked. So those are the features that babies have. So if a baby's got it, we're sort of set up to look at the little baby and just go like, oh my goodness, that's just adorable, and want to cuddle it and take care of it. And that's exactly what we want to do with snowy plovers. So I am going to just sort of give you just to kind of reinforce this neonatal features idea. Let me see here. I'm going to change colors. There we are. So if I have, I've got a little character here. All right. This is not cute. That's not cute at all. So it's maybe even slightly creepy. But let me take the same drawing and I'm just going to change some of the proportions here. It just turned cute, right? It's a circle with a couple of eye spots on it and a body. But what made it cute? It's proportions. Your cuteness is our response to proportions. So if something has a big head, like a baby, and big eyes on that head relative to that head, we want to snuggle. And so when you look at something and you kind of get this kind of cute hit, that is proportions speaking to you. So I'm going to get rid of the cute and not cute. Let's take a look at the proportions on this bird. By proportions, the main thing, actually, first we're going to do this in order. We're going to look at posture, we're going to look at proportions, we're going to look at angles. So by posture, what I want you to look at is the shape of the air running right down its back here. Right? So if the bird is standing up and its back is in line with its head, we get a bird with an angle at this line, at this angle. A bird that was holding its body a little bit more closer to the ground, that line could be at a different angle. In order to make this bird look like this bird, I'm going to start by just capturing the posture of the bird by looking at what artists call the negative shape. Negative shape is the shape of the air behind the bird here. This zone back here is what we call the negative shape. And that is where, if I look at the bird, I get all caught up in cuteness and little details of feathers. But if I look at the shape of the air behind the bird, then I can get past all that cuteness and see the basic shape. Let me erase my scribbles here for just a moment. And I want you to look at, not at the bird, but I want you to look at the shape of the air behind the bird. So there's a slight little indentation here, and then we have this. Generally speaking, that's all lining up in a straight line. If we want to kind of get really detailed about it, there's a little indentation bump right in there. But basically you're looking at a bird with its holding its body at that angle. That is the posture of the bird. And different species hold their bodies at rest at different angles. So we're going to start with that. The next thing we're going to look at are the proportions of the bird. By proportions, most importantly, I'm going to be looking at how big is the head relative to the body. So I'm going to put a little ball around this thing's head. It's easy to get your proportions right when you're just tracing on top of a photograph, which, by the way, I often do. If I'm going to be going on a long plane flight, I will sometimes see if I can grab a little magazine that has a bunch of photographs of birds. And I can sometimes just practice sketching them from the photographs in there. And I will also just trace and draw directly on top of those photographs as another way of training my eye and my brain. So I'm looking at how big is this ball relative to this ball. That is proportions. So if I use this ball as a measuring tool, then I can put about one head in here. I can put about another head in here. It's a little bit wider than those, but the body's about a little bit more than 2 heads long. I think I made these little heads here a little bit too big. So maybe the first one might want to be up in here. The second one might want to be up in here. That leaves me a little bit of extra little wiggle room there. It's not exactly 2 heads big, but we've got 2 heads there. So when I'm looking at those sort of things, I'm looking at proportions. And I will often use a bird's head as kind of an indicator of proportion. So if I have a bird and it's roughly got a head that's this big, I will think to myself, all right, we're going to roughly kind of get, 1 head, 2 heads. All right, we're going to have a body that is about 2 heads big in there. So that's proportions. We can actually take these proportions a little bit further. And let's look at the eye relative to the head here. So I've got an eye that starts from here to here. This eye is a really, really big eye. If I take that eye and I put it in here, there's about another eye there, there's about another eye here, there's about another eye here. And then a little bit of bonus here. So this is about 1, 2, 3, 4 eyes. This head is about 4¼ eyes wide. And that eye is sitting in there close to the location of the second quarter. So that means if I have a head this big, and here's my halfway point, my eye is probably going to be doing something like that in there. That's a big eye. As you're going to see on the birds we're going to be looking at after this, that's a really, really big eye. And if you don't make your eye big enough, your bird won't look cute enough. And so if you want to cute up your bird, make its eye bigger. So that's a little bit about proportions. There are a few other things you can do with proportions. For instance, if you're thinking about how big do I make the beak, sometimes what people will do is they will think, I'm going to use my beak now as a measuring tool. All right, well, how big is the head? It's about 2½ beaks. So you can think, often people will do that when they're looking at, say, a downy woodpecker versus a hairy woodpecker, the hairy woodpecker having the bigger beak. They'll look at, you've got a big head and you've got a little dinky beak sticking out of it. You're like, oh, you're cute. You're a hairy, a downy. If you've got a big head and you've got a big old beak, then you go like, oh gosh, I just found myself a hairy woodpecker. So downy, hairy. So you can use that sort of thinking of that, take that beak and flip it in. And that gives you, that's a useful way of thinking about how big is this beak relative to the head. The final thing that I'm going to look at here in blocking in this bird is what we call the angles. And these are looking at certain key lines, certain key locations on the bird that are going to help me make my bird really look right. And there are a few key places that I want people to look at. First and most importantly, I want to just sort of reinforce that kind of the idea of the angle on the back of the bird. This negative shape out here, this negative shape is going to be essential for kind of starting the pose of my bird. I'm then going to be, attaching the head. I'm going to be attaching the body to it. I'll go through those steps in just a moment. A couple other things that are really important is the negative shape that you see underneath the throat. So just kind of go from where the throat comes in to, we're going to see on old birds from at some point, there is a place where the throat or the beak comes in on the head, and that's going to then blend into the start of the body of the bird. Look carefully at this angle. This shape here is going to be different on different birds. A final one that is very useful and really helps carve the face of this bird is what is the angle as you come up the beak to go to the forehead. That beak forehead angle is going to be different on different species. On a lot of shorebirds, like our plover friend here, there's this very steep cliff right in here. And so I'm going to look for what is that angle. If I am looking at another oops, wrong drawing tool. If I'm looking at, let's say I've got, a basic bird head. Now, if I were drawing, a meadowlark, this forehead angle would be really swept back. And so whether it's steep or swept back, what this angle is right in there, let's even change the color to emphasize this angle. What is your forehead angle? That is a great thing to look for to make your little bird look like your bird. So again, posture, proportions, and angles. What I'm going to do now is I am going to bounce over to a share screen. And there I'm going to be looking at, you're going to be able to see me drawing, and sort of real time, I'm going to put some lines down to kind of block in the plover we just saw. And I want to show you kind of how I would go about thinking about that. You're going to see that the lines that I'm going to make are going to emphasize the body shape, the basic angles, posture, proportion of this bird. And I'm not getting bogged down in his in details, especially at the start. Actually, this would be a good chance looking to check in with this. When I was giving a demonstration last weekend, for part of the time, I thought that people were looking at the same thing that I was looking at. I just want to check in with my hosts here. Have you been looking at a picture of a plover with a bunch of red lines appearing on it?
Yep. Okay,
so if that's what you've been seeing, you haven't missed anything. There hasn't been anything else going on. Great. Serena of Sfbbo just pointed out that a great use for old calendars is, drawing on top of your birds and using those as studies. That's Serena. Thank you very much for that that idea. Let's bounce over here and let's think about how I'm going to block in this bird. So here, I'm just kind of going to go from memory about how that bird looked. You're going to be drawing one of these a little bit later. And I remember that its back angle was something roughly like this. So that's my first line on my paper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a head, and just sort of remembering that this bird had a big old head. And then what I do is I'm going to put in a little line to show me approximately where its beak is. I call this the eye beak line, and the eye is going to be lined up on this line. The beak is going to be on this. It's also sort of showing me what direction my bird is looking. And then remember those angles. I want to look at what the angle is in front of the throat. I remember it kind of came down, it came out, and then it came back down. So there's a little kind of zigzag right in there. So those are usually a couple of my first critical lines. Then what I'm going to do is thinking about how big this head is. How big do I want to make this body? I want to make it, there's about one head, two heads, and a little bit of change down there. I'm going to try to make this bird's body roughly that big. Then I'm going to remember my forehead angle. And let's put in that eye. Remember, here's the halfway point. It was kind of in this first quarter. And there's going to be, I have a big eye that is going to be somewhere in there. And now just from memory, I'm going to try to put in just a few other features of this bird. It had a little tail that stuck out here. There was a little kind of cone that went, kind of a cone of feathers that stuck into that. It was sweet and adorable. Give it a little forehead. I think it was peeking somewhere back behind the eye instead of up here. It wasn't kind of crested like that. It was kind of peeking somewhere in there. How big will that bill be? Maybe something like that. And I want to think of to get my bird to balance, to sit on. Oh, there's a slight little loopy lump in here, wasn't there? It kind of came down and then out. So I'm going to give this line just a little bit of. And then the legs are going to balance this bird. If you think of this thing kind of carved out of wood, if I were to put the legs, kind of the leg down here, connecting to the ground, this would tilt forward. If I put it here, it would tilt back. But somewhere about in here, I think is where the kind of balance point of this bird would be. So I'm just kind of eyeballing that. The leg doesn't come down from there. I just want to visualize that line. The leg is going to come out from someplace behind that, and it is going to go down to that point. So that line is going to be where that foot touches the ground. And I don't remember what was going on with the feet of it. Maybe the feet of this bird were hidden. So that is just sort of from memory and from doing that kind of discussion of what we're looking at. That's what I'm getting. Let's take a look now at the bird again and see how well we did. Birdie, where are you? Share screen. There we are. Oh, hey. Let's take a look. All right, not that bad. We did pretty well. That's pretty cute. So when you've got your bird basically blocked in, then what I will do is I will start to talk out loud the details that I see. If I just try to stare at the bird and then try to transfer those details down to my piece of paper, it doesn't work very well for me, because what will happen is I will get I'll get lost in all those feathers. So let me tell you about, sort of give you an example of how I would talk out loud to this bird. All right, on the belly of the bird, there is a crescent moon of white, a thin crescent of moon that curves across the bottom all the way up to the undertail coverts, following the general curvature of the body. On the back, so that's this in here, on the back of the bird, there is a little triangle. It goes straight across the top to that little point where the neck comes down. And this is kind of interesting. I didn't notice this before, but look at this. There's a little change in angle right here. This is going down more steeply. This is going out. That's interesting. All right, so there's a little triangle up here on our birdie's back. There's a white goes all the way to the close to the back here, goes up in front of the eye. There's a little bit of brown in front of the eye, and then all the way across the forehead and over the eye and behind it. So that makes a kind of a hook of brown going across the top of the head and into the eye. So when I'm looking at the bird itself, I actually am talking out loud to it, just like I am doing right now. So I'm describing what I see in where those lines go. And the reason that I do that is that if I then go back to this, and I'm thinking like, oh, what was that? All right, there was that triangle, right? And then there was the crescent that went across here. Maybe they have this goes out and that goes down more. That would be kind of cool. So there's white that came back, and that white went a little bit in front of the eye, and there was a big white forehead with a big eye stripe, so something like this. So having talked it out loud, I'm able to hold this information in my head just a little bit longer. So I'm suggesting you look at posture, proportion, and angles. When you are thinking about the patterns on the bird, say it out loud. And that helps all those details. If you just kind of like, I'm going to remember that, I'm going to remember that, I'm going to remember that, but you're not really putting it into words, it's hard to remember that. It's really hard to remember all those details. Such a cute little bird. I'm going to just make my drawing here a little bit fluffier by kind of suggesting there's a few little kind of cracks in the fluff that are down here. There's a little bit of, maybe there's a little bit of fluff in here. And yes, there were a whole bunch of little scalloped curving feathers in here. I'm really not going to worry about that for the purposes of this little sketch. That's a great thing to do if you're drawing from a photograph, but out in the field, it's going to be hard to get that. So what we've done here is looked at postures, proportions, and angles to get this bird. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to show you a different photograph of the plover. And we are going to, so that last one was in winter. We're going to see what we can do to get, let's see, there's share screen. There's my little plover friend, and kaboom. All right, and play. By the way, the photographs in this slideshow that I'm sharing with you are all the work of Vivek Kanzode and Ashok Khosla. There are two wonderful bird photographers who have websites, and they encourage birders and sketchers to use those photographs as resources for our drawings. So if you would like to practice drawing plovers or other birds from photographs, which is a great activity to do, then please use those. The website URLs are seeingbirds.com. That is Ashok Khosla, and birdpixel.com. That's Vivek Kanzode. Wonderful. These are Vivek's. So here's another plover. All right. So this one is in a slightly more active pose, kind of leaning forward. And we're also seeing it now in breeding plumage. So in breeding plumage, we're seeing some really nice contrast back here. This nice little collar piece that was this piece here, now looking old, dark, and groovy. The bottom part of this has turned dark. We're not getting as much smudging up, going up like this. Let's compare that. Right before we were kind of smudging up into here. Now we're not. Right, and the forehead here, all nice and dark. Imagine drawing a little line here across the back of the eye to here. That will help us get where those lights should be. What I'm going to ask you to do is use posture, proportion, and angles to carve in and draw this basic shape. Right? Let's try that now on your piece of paper. Make that eye big. some point, kind of back off your bird and do the cuteness test. Does it look cute enough? If it looks too cute, you made the head and eye too big. If it doesn't look cute enough, then you might want to make your eye bigger. Make that head bigger. It's such a good looking little bird. And this one is going to be posing for us here for about another minute. Sarah pointed out that, yes, this bird is banded, and something that is wonderful to do. Avea, thank you for putting seeingbirds.com and birdpixel.com into the chat. If you do see banded birds, if you have a powerful telescope, you're sometimes able to actually read numbers on them, and you can report those to Fish and Game to help them track banded birds. So these are little colored bands that scientists put on birds just to give them a little bit more bling, and so they can tell individuals apart in the field. I studied lazuli buntings in Montana, and we put color bands on the legs of the buntings, and it turns out, because we're trying to figure out how they selected mates and all these sorts of things. Well, it turns out that if you are the bunting who is lucky enough to get a bunch of red bands on your legs, the female birds go crazy for you. And that bird had all these nests all over the mountain, multiple nestings, but the one that was like green over blue, black over, brown, that one, yeah, not so much. So if you ever are in the banding study, try to get the one with all the pretty colors, although it might make you more vulnerable to predators. Let's take a look at this bunting for a sec. Bunting? This plover for a second, because I'm going to show you something slightly different on this and about how I would approach a bird in this pose from this angle, because there's a couple of things that are going on. One is that its head is slightly up, so it's not in line with the rest of the back, and I'll show you how I handle that. And also it's holding its body at a slight 3/4 view towards us, and I'll show you how I handle that and some other things that follow from it. So when we're looking at the negative shape behind the bird, that first angle now has a big bend in it. So that's what you're going to lead with. Then we're putting in that ball of the head, and we're then using that to measure down to get approximately how big we actually, whoops, I kind of went out of order. Let's not do that. We're not doing that. Hold on, where's, oh, there's my eraser. There we go. I am going to look at the negative shape in the front of the bird, that angle, and then drop that ball of the body down into that. Just as we did before, this negative shape and this negative shape in the back really help carve the bird. Steep forehead is going to help us look really plovery. But this bird, because it is in a 3/4 view position, there is something slightly different that we want to take into account. And that is that the midline of this bird, if I were to draw a line around like the zipper of this bird, it would curve down the front of the bird this way. So if you're just looking at this bird in profile, you would not get to see all of this area on the left-hand side of this line. And what that does is several things. One is that you're going to have this effect here, where here's your head of your bird, but your beak is going to actually plant into the base of the bird back here, not be just something that is up against the side of the bird here. So you wanted your beak starting here. That means that this far side of the bird out here is going to be further out along that bill. It also means that the eye is going to be closer to the back than it was before. Because part of the back of the head that was out here is now hidden around the back of that head because it's slightly looking towards you. So that means that this eye, you're going to expect that big old eye to be further back on the head. The last little piece that I want to think about that is I want to think of the base of these legs as the bird turns more towards you, you're going to see more space here between these legs. And also the legs will appear to be a little bit more vertical than they did before. So all of those are some tricks that are going to help you slightly rotate this bird towards you. Actually, on these legs, notice that this one is straighter and this one feels more bent. So this one is more vertical and this one is at, oops, move this out of my way. Think of this angle here of this leg and this angle here of this. This is a bigger angle. What's going on with that? Well, what's happening with our little bird here is that the legs actually come down at the same angle, but this one here is turned more towards you, and you're seeing more of the front of this leg, making this leg more vertical, and you're seeing more of the side of this leg. This is something that you can see on lots of birds. If I just sort of have a generic bird here in 3/4 view, it's got a tail that is going up away from you. You're going to see the leg that is close to you straighter down, the leg that is further away from you out at an angle like that. So on all sorts of birds, expect this different angles in the leg. The one further away from you is going to be at a shallower angle. This one here is up at a steeper angle. That is a little bit of fun with plover. So let's bounce over to another bird. And so let's go to our bird biologists. Angie, what can you tell us about hold on, I'll find my face screen. What are some things that Sfbbo is doing with the least tern?
Yeah, so like the snowy plover, California least terns also breed in the Bay Area, and that's also when we are monitoring them. Like the snowy plover, the California least tern is a listed species. However, it is considered endangered instead of just threatened. These birds are only in the Bay Area during the breeding season, whereas snowy plovers are here year round. And they're also really small, just like plovers are. They have a lot of really similar breeding characteristics. They nest directly on the ground, but California least terns are colonial nesting species. So plovers kind of like their personal space from each other when they're nesting. Least terns like to gather up in huge colonies. And they're successful that way because while being in huge colonies makes them more visible to their predators, they can chase them away usually. It's kind of scary to see a bunch of tiny little birds flying at you screaming. California least terns are super great. You'll often hear them way before you see them. They sound just like your dog's squeaky toy. It's absolutely wonderful. But because they share a lot of the same kind of breeding characteristics as snowy plovers, they also face the same kind of threats. So in the Bay Area, the least terns that we monitor nest in salt pan habitats. So they're straight on the ground, which means they're very susceptible to predation. On the beaches, again, people trespassing into breeding areas and also dogs off leash are a big issue. So again, I'm going to advocate, please follow your local leash laws and also respect any temporary fencing that you might see on the beach. These birds really aren't doing super well right now. We've had colony collapses in the past several years that we've been monitoring them due to predation and also disturbance. But just like plovers, they're super cute, they're really tiny, and they're really charismatic.
It's so adorable. These are, you know, when you, and also just like the whole squeaky toy voice, like say a Caspian tern sort of sounds like, you know, gosh, there's a pterodactyl in the sky. And these little guys are just, what's your best imitation of a least tern?
Oh God, I really can't do bird imitation super well, but they're kind of like,
Adorbs. So you don't want, oh no, you don't want your least tern drawing to look like a snowy plover, right? So what are we going to do about that? Well, I'm glad you asked. What we're going to do is we're going to, let's take a look at the posture, the portions, and angles of our little least terns. All right. So we're now bouncing over to, oh, what is the status of least terns in the Bay Area? How are they doing?
Like I mentioned before, we've had colony collapses for the colonies that Sfbbo monitors. There is another much larger colony that is monitored by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And as far as I'm aware, that colony is doing much better because they're nesting on marsh islands. So our birds that we monitor nest directly on the salt pond bottom. There's not a lot that protects them from mammalian predators, which are really difficult to deal with when you're a tiny bird and there's a coyote or a fox coming by to try to eat your eggs.
Or off-leash dog.
Yeah, or the dogs don't eat them, but they will scare the adults away, and the adults will only deal with so much. So if your dog keeps on coming by, the birds will say, this is not a safe place. I'm not going to put my nest here. And usually that just results in failure. Most of these birds will only try to nest maybe once or twice. And after that, they're done for the whole breeding season.
Yeah, Avea asked a really interesting question. What is the threats from feral cats?
Yeah, so we at Sfbbo use camera traps to monitor some of our nests. We take great care to make sure that our camera traps aren't an attractant to predators. And while cats are seen very often in our field sites, we actually don't see them on our camera traps very much. It's usually things like foxes, coyotes, skunks. Corvids are a huge issue for our birds. So the cats generally will go after adult birds more likely, but I don't know if there's very much research into them depredating eggs.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let's take a look at how to draw these adorable little rascals. I'm going to, again, share screen, and we are going to look at the least Tern. This time I'm using photographs from, the last ones were from Vivek Kenzode. These are from my friend Ashok Khosla. Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool. So let's just think, I'm going to just, yes, when they're flying around, it's a whole different class. So I'm not going to actually be emphasizing how to draw birds in flight in this class. That will be a different class that we can do. But this, I wanted to be able to just point out a few features of this bird. On this flying bird, I can see several different parts of the wing, and I'm going to divide the wing up into 3 different zones here. There's the big triangle, and these are what are called primary feathers. There is the short rectangle or square up in here. These are the secondary. And in this, you can see, it'll be easier to see once I erase my pink lines. There is a little pad of feathers right up here where the wing attaches into the body. And they're a little bit longer than the wing. These are called scapular feathers. So I've got my primaries, my secondaries, and my scapular feathers. Let me clear those away. Notice particularly those scapular feathers up there. Nice little shadow right in there, little pad. Now, when the wing gets folded up, I want to actually, in a moment, I'll be looking at posture, proportion, and angles, but because we just were looking at that wing, I want to just help you kind of understand what you're seeing here. Because there's a few little zones that if you can lightly indicate those in terms of putting in details, I'm not asking you to put in every feather, 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 but a little indication of this is going to go a long way in understanding the structure that we see. And what I've got is, see this little shadow up here? That's the edge of my scapular feathers that are in a little pile right up here. And that sits on top of this little wedge here. Bigger feathers towards this end, smaller feathers up here. These are the secondary feathers. And sticking out from underneath those is this long wedge. Those are the primary feathers. Notice that they're kind of lined up along the back here. Along the top edge, you can see the back edges of these feathers going down. They all make this tight little V. So the wing folded up, you can think of as these 3 piles. The scapular feathers on the top, the secondary feathers, and the primary feathers sticking out underneath that. Notice that the belly feathers, the breast feathers, cover up the front part of the secondaries here. The scapular feathers cover up the top part of the secondaries. So the secondaries have the scapulars on the top. They have breast and belly feathers covering up part of their sides, but you see them in the back. So let's look at this bird in terms of posture, proportions, and angles. Let's do the same thing. Just in terms of posture, what is the angle across the back here? Roughly, it is something like that. I could make that a little bit more nuanced and capture that little bump right in there at the back of the head. But I want to get that general sweep. And then I'm putting in my head. I'm putting in an oval here for this bird's head. And let's take a look at how many of those heads are going to fill out our body here. Maybe 3.5 heads. So this head is bigger proportionately than what we were seeing with the Snowy Plover. Here is this nice angle in the front of the throat, kind of curving down. So what I'd like to do is I really take a look at the gray here, the shape of the gray ear. It's a little there's just a little S curve that comes down off that throat. If you get this angle here on the back, this angle here on the front, that does so much to carve your birds. And finally, the other angle that I find really lovely and helpful is the forehead angle. Do you remember the plover angle? Look at this. Look at this steep forehead angle. Okay, that's going to be really important to make this tern look like a tern. If you want your drawing to turn out well, that's going to be a great place to look. So what would my kind of initial lines be? I would start just by thinking, what is the angle on the back of my bird? I could kind of put in a little bit of an indentation right in there where the, let's use red right in here. But I want to get that line is going to give me my bird posture. I'm giving my bird an oval for its head, and this bird is looking out this way. And then there's an S curve for the front of the throat. Put in a ball for the bird's body, tucking in against this back line and into this front of the breast. I like to put a little mark somewhere on my bird where the start of the wing is, and then I'm looking where that goes. This little thing you see sticking out here, that's the bird's tail. So the tail and the kind of the cone of the tail here, these are called the undertail coverts. That part I'm turning red right there. Those are my bird's undertail coverts. They make a little a cone on the bottom of the before you get to the tail. And you have a few little tail feathers sticking out. The wing feathers are going to be longer. So those are some of the initial feathers that I would use or the initial lines that I would use to draw this bird. I am going to clear all these drawings, and then I'm going to do a little demonstration off on the side of how I would go about how I'd go about drawing this. So let me see here. I am going to play slideshow in window. I'm going to have one slide that is, I'm going to actually allow you to see the bird and what I'm drawing at the same time. And here we go. Oops, now I want this to move this in just a little bit here. There I go. Now, I'm going to do a desktop share. Just checking with my co-hosts here. Can you see the tern and the piece of paper that I draw on at the same time?
Yes.
All right. Let's play with this. All right. So how would I kind of go about getting the posture and proportion and angles of this bird? I'd start just with that kind of getting that line along the back. I often will think of just sort of almost patting the bird. And we'll pet the bird and feel like, what angle are you back? It's nice to pet over time, right? And then I'm going to give it a little ball for its head. Might want to refine that angle just a little bit. Give it a little bit of that a bump right there. But my bird is looking basically forward and slightly down. And there is that S curve along the front of its tummy. And then I'm putting in a ball, another oval, a longer oval for that bird's body. It has a wing that is starting somewhere in here, and it's going out that far direction, really far. The bird has a little bit of an undertail covert. Now, for the wing detail, I'm going to think of, I've got scapular feathers that are up here. I have a zone in here of secondary feathers that comes down, and then I have this wonderful triangle of primary feathers that stick out underneath that. On the far side, I can see the other wing sticking up. Where's the legs in here? Are they coming from back here? No, my bird would fall forward. They're much further forward in here. They're coming down somewhere in here. Maybe even further forward, somewhere in here. Now I'm going to add a little bit more turny details to it. So slopey forehead. I have a beak that is really long. Look at how long that beak is relative to the head. If you were to flip that beak back into the head, how far would it go? Notice how small relative to that whole business the eye is also. Before we had that great big cute eye, now we don't have a cute eye, and the eye is mostly lost. Now I'm going to, in that wonderful dark stripe, so here's large bill, and I have a white spot on my forehead, and on something like this, I sometimes don't even draw the eye. My eye is really feeling lost in that. And I get in there and I spend all this time kind of drawing an eye. I will kind of be adding in these details that I don't really see. So if you can't really see the eye, you can skip that eye. Bring back. And I've got the basic proportions of the bird. Just going to add a little bit of color to it. That's get a little bit of this is wash paint. I'm going to give it a slightly light gray back, gray in here. All this gray, make the tips out here a little bit darker. Maybe I want some black for that. Yes, I do. That just calls out for a little bit of black. What wonderful little birds. Little orange legs.
And Jack, we have someone who's asking what you're coloring with.
So I am adding some color into this. This is gouache paint, which is very much like watercolor. The brush that I'm using is what's called a water brush, and it just has the, if you look, there's the water inside the handle. So I just can rub that on the little palette and then rub it here. It makes just the logistics of painting something, especially in the field, so much easier. The contrast on this thing is just so much fun. But don't worry about, you know, where the black goes on the head until you've got something that kind of gives you, you look at the shape of it, say that feels turny to me. Let's just try this one more with this turn. Now look at this angle here. That's what we're going to start with, okay? Your head is up, so it's a bird in a different position. And what you want to do is to not get lost in detail at the start, but get this angle along the back of the bird. Then you're going to attach a head to that. You're going to get this S curve probably down to here. And so you can then drop a body in behind it. But notice that this bird, its body is held up at a steeper angle than this bird. This one down low. This one, body is not just head up, this angle of the back is higher. So to get that posture, let's start with that. So let's, everybody at home, let's do this together. Let's all do that. We'll be drawing at home. Trying to get that long body. posture, proportions, and these angles. Mine feels like it's got a little bit too much of it, so I'm going to trim that head back. Keep that helps. Now it's got too steep of a forehead, so I'm going to give it a little bit more forehead back. Give it like that. You can add, you can take away. And this bird will be around for about half a minute more. Wasn't that fun? Let's take a look at one more bird. Let's take a look at the white-crowned sparrow. We're going to go for a totally different body shape. Now, we don't want our white-crowned sparrows to look like terns or plovers. And again, that posture, proportion, and angles is going to be really useful. But before we do, let's join our field biologist and learn a little bit about these our local white-crowns.
Yeah, so I personally don't work with the white-crowned sparrows as a staff member of SFBBO. We have a field station that we run year-round that is almost exclusively run by our dedicated volunteers. And what we do is we go out and we mist net for birds for 5 hours after sunrise 3 times a week. And the white-crowned sparrows are always a wonderful addition to the birds that we capture in the winter time. So these birds are around only in the winter. They don't breed nearby our banding station, at least. And we get primarily 2 different subspecies of white-crowned sparrow. We get the Gambles and the Puget Sound. They're very lovely birds, and they're very great to hold because even though they are a small bird, they are a large sparrow, and they're quite chunky. These birds really enjoy the habitat that we have around the banding station. And for the most part, white-crowned sparrows enjoy drier habitats than some of our other sparrows, and they're a pretty hardy species as well. But there are some differences between the types of habitats that these 2 different subspecies enjoy. So we did do a study in 2001 where we found that the Gamble white-crowned sparrow prefer drier habitats compared to the Puget Sound.
So you've got all sorts of projects going on with volunteers throughout the Bay Area?
Yeah, so SFBBO runs a lot of volunteer projects. Some of them are single events. So for example, in the Plover program, we do a mud stomp every year, a whole day. We get a bunch of people to come out, spread shells and put out chick shelters for our terns and our plovers. That's once a year. And if you just come out for, 4 or 5 hours and then you leave. Some of our other projects, like the banding station, operate year-round. And like I said, we trap 3 days a week, and it's almost all volunteers. It's a really wonderful experience to be there. And all the volunteers are so skilled and so dedicated to coming out and helping us with this citizen science.
So if people wanted to get involved with SFBBO, with sort of to volunteer in some of these research opportunities, how would they go about that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to visit our website. It's got all sorts of information on the different volunteer events that we run, in addition to other outreach and education events that we do. The banding station does have a wait list, but we are
get on
trying to
that
get
now,
through that.
right?
Yeah, get on it now. We are trying to get through that. And if you think that you're going to stay in the Bay Area, it's honestly a wonderful experience. I personally volunteer at the banding station, and I've been doing so since 2017 as well. I don't get paid to be out there, but I love it so much. And we also have other projects where you can contribute to citizen science as well, such as our colonial water bird monitoring project. That's a little bit more independent than some of our other volunteer opportunities, but they're all really great, and some of them are a little bit more immediate than others.
Oh, that's great. And folks can learn more about that just by going to the website.
Yeah, that's correct. So our website is sfbbo.org. So it's our acronym, and all of our information on being a member or volunteering for us or attending our events is located on our website.
Excellent. You want to draw some white-crowns? Let's take a look at how to draw the white-crowned sparrow. So again, we've got postures, proportions, and angles, and we want them to look like white-crowned sparrows. So let's take a look at the white-crowned sparrow from that perspective. Do and share. There we are. White-crowned sparrows. Oh yeah, there it is in all of its. Gosh, I wonder why they call it that. Look at those white crowns. Right, so beautiful little bird. And let's just think about this thing in terms of posture, proportion, and angles. We want our sparrows to feel sparrowy. How do we start this? I am going to give myself, for posture, I have this angle, at least in this position of this bird, this angle across the back. I'm going to put in a ball of its head, and let's look at this bird's body. So about 2.5 here. Let's see, where's my eraser? There's my eraser. My little bird friend here is looking in this direction. There's my Beak Line. Little angle going down straight under the throat, out a little bit, and curve down. So you don't have to draw the whole thing, but just get this angle, get this sort of zone of the negative shape. You get this zone of the negative shape, and then you're going to just be able to tuck your body ball up into those sort of things that will kind of act like a catcher's mitt for your body ball. Think of the tail can droop down, the tail can be up. So put in a line for your tail, and then support that with just a little cone at the base to smooth it in to your body. On a bird like this one, we have the same thing going on. We have scapular feathers up here. We have our secondary feathers here in a big pile. So at the top, there are these rows of covert feathers. And on sparrows, these little rows of feathers, you basically get tiny, small row of feathers, larger row of feathers, and then, oh, there's my little alarm going off to say it's time to put my little daughters to bed. Hold on a second. Turn it off. Fortunately, I've got support tonight on how to handle that. So you've got your small feathers up in here, your medium feathers in here, and then the big secondary feathers hang down. The primary feathers stick out in a little wedge behind that. So you can think of the bird wing essentially as sort of an upper rectangle, the top part of which has a couple of rows in it. And then a bottom wedge sticking out within. These are the primary feathers. These are the secondary feathers. And there's these ones at the top, those are part of the sort of secondary business. Those are the secondary coverts that cover up those larger feathers. So this, let's erase all of that. Let's just bounce over and put a little sketch in for our little sparrow friend. And we'll take a, don't worry too much about the stripes on the head. We'll handle those in just a moment. So you've got your little back of your bird. You've got the head ball of your bird. And our head is sticking up. And I'm going to put in a body ball for my bird. And its tail is sticking out here, and I put a little cone on the base of that tail. Wing drooping down. And somewhere about in here. And that wing is going to be kind of an upper box with a wedge sticking down. Oh, I forgot my forehead angle. My forehead angle. This one's at a little bit of a 3/4 of the angle, but kind of a steeper forehead angle there. Not as flat back as the Tern, not as vertical as the as a little plover friend. This one's all fluffed up, so you don't see very much, but its legs coming out just about. When you're drawing the head of a white-crowned sparrow, I'm going to give folks a kind of a larger head view on this. Here's your eye beak line. And there's an upper beak that comes down, a lower beak that comes down. The feathers in the top part kind of curve into it a little bit. And the feathers in the lower bill curve into it. And that eye is fairly close to the front, but it's not super big. Up for a little bit of a forehead. Notice that the feathers on the chin are going to start somewhere out on the beak itself. There are two sets of dark lines on the head of the bird. One is these crown stripes that go over the top. So I'm first going to give myself the top part, which is white. There's a little white border. And we are going to come in here over the eye and down. It's called a lateral crown stripe. And then there's this eye stripe. Just a little bit of kind of baggy look around its eyes. But there's from right back on the eye, the white-crowned sparrow has a bar that goes back. If folks are really into it, that's on the top edge of its ear patch. And that gives you the pattern on the top of the head of a white-crowned sparrow. Let's take a look at a white-crowned sparrow in a slightly different position. And then we're going to let people go to get their dinner in just a moment. This bird has its feathers really sleeked down. So the first bird was colder. This one is in a hotter environment. So it's taken its feathers and sleeked them down across its body so that it doesn't hold as much heat. Imagine if you were walking around all the time in a down jacket, but you could, with a muscle contraction, control how much loft there is in your down jacket. So you can flatten it out and shed the heat, or you can puff it up to hold heat. So it's a fantastic system. So note that negative shape on the top. That's your first posture line. Smaller head. And nice kind of S curve here under its throat. And then we can put that ball of the body in. This bird is at not as steep a body angle as that first one. So in your first posture line, you'll have this be the lower line. Let's all draw this one now and try to get some lines that just sort of have this sense of posture and proportion. Don't worry about the details. We're interested in posture and proportion. That is a white-crowned sparrow. So this photograph, again, is taken from the collection of, this comes from Vivek Kenzode on birdpixel.com. Birdpixel and Seeing Birds being the two that I use on a really regular basis. We've had a chance here to, whoops, didn't mean to do that. We've had a chance here, hi, to look at kind of critical angles, postures, and proportions on these different birds. When you go to draw birds, a lot of us really get focused on like what's going on with that eye stripe. And we start leaning into that, and our drawing doesn't get the basic of the plover, because maybe we've drawn a lot of sparrows and plovers are new to us. Our plover can end up looking kind of sparrowy and generic. But if I'm looking at those sorts of angles, the posture, proportions, and angles, and kind of approach the bird that way, first get that stuff blocked in, then I can drop those details in it. You got a black spot here, a black spot here, a black spot. Okay, it's going to feel like a plover. And that makes a huge difference to us being able to draw the birds that we see. The more we do, the more wonderful the biodiversity of the world around us becomes. Exploring this world is an absolute delight and a privilege and an honor. And we can do a lot to help protect these birds. That's exactly the sort of work that San Francisco Breeding Bird Observatory does, providing research and education. It helps us make informed decisions about the sorts of policies that are going to help protect bird populations. They really need the help from human beings right now. And they need that help to be targeted. Bird populations across the globe are crashing and plummeting. And it's work by people like San Francisco Breeding Bird Observatory that helps us understand why. If we're going to flatten that curve and turn it around, we need data, we need evidence, we need to understand the root causes as best we can. And that's why the work of this organization is so important. There's on their website, they didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to make a pitch. I'm going to encourage people to get in there and make a donation to support this research. So you can find that on sfbbo.org, right? sfbbo.org. You can also find great volunteer opportunities there. I know that sometimes people in my workshops send me a donation to help support my work. I really love that, and it's that really helps me do all sorts of groovy things. Tonight, I'm going to encourage you to turn around and make, instead of a donation to me, to make a donation to support San Francisco Breeding Bird Observatory. Because again, it's work from scientists like this that is going to really help us make an impact on these bird populations. I'd like to bring our my co-hosts back in here and oops, sorry, my bad. Remove spotlight. Hi there, Laura. It's nice to see you. Here we go. Thoughts, comments, ideas about birds research and what we're doing.
Angie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so honestly, being an active member and participating and engaging with organizations that do science and conservation is huge. We are a nonprofit, and you would think that being in the Bay Area, where there is a ton of wealth and there's so many people who have diverse interests and so many people who love nature, you'd think that it would be easier to be here, but only 3% of donations go toward conservation and environmental causes. So being here, spreading the word, coming to our events really does make a big difference. And it's also very easy for everyone and very accessible. If you have the time or energy or money to do more, then donating to your local causes really helps. It's nice to give money to big organizations like the Audubon Society, but when you donate to a small and local organization, the money goes a lot further in terms of making a real impact in your backyard. And obviously, a lot of our programs are volunteer run or very heavily supported by volunteers, and there's a lot that we could never do without our amazing and dedicated volunteers. So if you have the time to do that as well, that is very much appreciated, and you are providing very, very vital data for a lot of our research.
That's right. Yeah, and Sfbbo is it's a small organization that is really strategically using the funds that they do get for maximum impact. So really mad respect to, I'm really delighted with the amount of stuff that you do. It's sort of this mouse that roared effect. Small organization, but big impact of the work that you do. So just great respect, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the field to monitor and help us understand the species.
Yeah, thank you, Angie, for sharing that. And thank you, Jack, of course, for plugging us, but also for everything that you do to get people interested in nature and really taking the time to observe and really appreciate the nature around us. I think it goes a long way to getting more people interested in protecting our local environments and hence our birds. So yeah, thank you so much again for everything that you do. I do hope people continue to support your work as well. You offer all these great workshops, and they're such a wonderful resource for connecting with nature.
And dear friends, we've gone 15 minutes over our predicted time. I hope that it doesn't put you, I know there's some people on the East Coast and even other people around the world on this call. I hope it's not too late for you, but we really hope that you enjoyed this. And perhaps if you are not in the San Francisco Bay Area, you can find research opportunities and citizen scientist opportunities near you. Getting involved with science really is an eye-opener about the level of rigor that goes into making any claim is profound. Seeing that firsthand can completely change the way we understand what science is and how science is done. Another great reason to get involved in these sorts of citizen science projects. Thank you all out there for joining us tonight. We really hope that you had a wonderful time, and we look forward to seeing you again. I doubt that this will be the last of collaborations between myself and Sfbbo. Everybody have a good night. Take care of yourself. Let's take care of this earth together with a wonderful community. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.